The human had been placed on display the way one might present a questionable antique, polished just enough to look intentional, surrounded by placards no one bothered to read, and watched by a crowd already convinced it wasn't worth much. A transparent containment field hummed softly around him, less for safety and more for presentation. The sign hovering beside it read Human, Terran, Category, Exotic Curiosity. The word exotic did a lot of heavy lifting across the galaxy. Sometimes it meant rare. Sometimes it meant dangerous. And sometimes, like now, it meant, "We don't quite know what to do with this, but it looks funny standing there." The crowd laughed. Not cruelly, at least not on purpose. It was the kind of laughter that came from certainty, the confidence of beings who believed they had already figured him out. Humans, according to the galactic consensus, were fragile, soft, emotionally leaky, known for overreacting, underperforming, and requiring far too much maintenance for the results they delivered. A species that smiled when nervous and joked when cornered, clearly a survival mechanism gone wrong. The human stood anyway. Calm. Hands relaxed at his sides. Posture casual enough to be mistaken for surrender. He wore the standard translation collar, a sleek band wrapped around his neck that pulsed faintly as it struggled to interpret tone, idiom, and sarcasm all at once. It wasn't doing a great job. "So," the human said, glancing at the crowd, "is this more of a museum thing, or am I expected to perform?" The collar translated it as, "Subject expresses confusion and mild fear." That got another laugh. Several spectators leaned closer to the field, scanning him with handheld analyzers. One noted his lack of visible armor. Another commented on the absence of natural claws. A third remarked, loudly, that his species had forward-facing eyes but still somehow managed to look lost most of the time. The human nodded along, as if listening to a bad review of a movie he'd already seen. "Notice how still it is," someone said. Classic freeze response. In reality, he was waiting. Humans had learned a long time ago that when a room full of people underestimated you, silence was an investment. The placard updated automatically as new data streamed in. Musculature unimpressive. Durability questionable. Intelligence inconsistent but creative. That last one blinked twice, as if embarrassed to be there. One alien child, something with too many eyes and not enough social awareness, pressed its face against the field. "Is it broken?" The human smiled. The collar interpreted that as submission. That smile was another point of confusion. Humans smiled when pleased, when uncomfortable, when angry, and sometimes just to see what would happen. The galaxy hadn't cracked that code yet. It mostly assumed smiling meant weakness. That assumption would age poorly. A nearby commentator spoke into a recording orb. "As you can see, the human remains compliant. Typical. Minimal threat response. Likely suitable for observation, light labor, or novelty placement." Novelty placement. The human rolled the phrase around in his head. He'd been called worse things in worse rooms by people who at least had the decency to look him in the eye. He shifted his weight slightly. The movement triggered a flurry of alerts on the scanners. Heart rate stable. Stress indicators low. Adrenal response odd. One analyst frowned. "It's not reacting appropriately. Perhaps it doesn't understand it's being evaluated," another suggested. "Oh, I understand," the human said. "I just don't see the grading rubric." The caller hesitated, then translated. Subject vocalizes uncertainty. Requests guidance. Laughter again. A comfortable wave of it. The kind that said everyone here agreed on the joke. The human glanced at the barrier holding him in place. Transparent. Smooth. State of the art. He tapped it once with his knuckle. The sound echoed faintly through the hall. A few technicians stiffened. The field flickered, just for a fraction of a second, then stabilized. The technicians relaxed. The human raised an eyebrow. "Neat," he said. "Does this thing come with a warranty?" The caller translated. Subject expresses admiration for containment. Shows acceptance. The crowd took that as confirmation. He wasn't dangerous. He wasn't clever in the ways that mattered. He was, at best, an entertaining oddity. Something to be looked at, discussed, possibly acquired. The word acquired hung in the air longer than the others. Across the hall, bids were already being placed on far more impressive specimens. Crystalline beings that bent light. Massive warriors bred for conquest. Entities that radiated psychic pressure just by existing. Compared to them, the human was small, quiet, ordinary. Which was precisely why he stood out. He met eyes with a passing merchant and gave a small, polite nod. The merchant flinched, unsure why. Eye contact among humans meant attention, not aggression, but the distinction was subtle and frequently misunderstood. The merchant hurried away, muttering something about predatory focus. The placard updated again. Behavior unsettling. Progress. The human shifted his stance, rolling his shoulders, loosening tension. Standing still for this long was hell on his lower back. No one had asked if he needed a chair, or water, or context. He'd been moved from transport to display with minimal explanation, the way one might handle luggage that looked like it might complain. Around him, the crowd's curiosity grew bolder. Questions were asked, not to him, but about him. How long do they live? Can they reproduce in captivity? Do they imprint? That last one earned a few interested murmurs. The human cleared his throat. For the record, he said, I can hear all of you. The caller translated, subject emits distress signal. Indicates auditory sensitivity. More laughter. He sighed, a sound universally misunderstood. Humans sighed when tired, annoyed, amused, or resigning themselves to chaos. The galaxy mostly heard it as a whine. Fine. If they wanted a display, he could do that. He straightened, squared his shoulders, and smiled again, this time sharper, more deliberate. The kind of smile that had talked bartenders into pouring one more drink and bosses into approving terrible ideas. Since I'm already up here, he said, anyone want to tell me what the prize is? The caller blinked, stalled, then translated. Subject requests clarification regarding ownership. That word landed differently. Ownership. The laughter faded, just a little. Not because of fear, yet, but because something in his tone hadn't matched the expectation. He didn't sound afraid. He sounded curious. And curiosity, as several species would later note, was a very human problem to underestimate. The bidding started the way galactic bidding always did, quietly, politely, and with the kind of restrained excitement that suggested everyone involved believed they were far too sophisticated to care. Numbers floated into the air as soft holograms, each one representing interest, curiosity, or in a few cases, poorly disguised impulse. The human watched them drift past his containment field like lazy fireflies, none of them lingering long enough to feel personal. Most bids were low. Almost apologetic. The kind you made when you wanted something but didn't want to admit it in front of company. 5 units, one collector murmured, already embarrassed. 7, another countered, then quickly added. For research. Of course it was for research. Everything questionable was. The human leaned back slightly, resting his weight on one heel. I feel like I should at least get a paddle, he said. Or a number. Something to wave dramatically. The caller translated, subject requests participation. Displays eagerness to please. That interpretation earned him a few indulgent smiles. He didn't bother correcting it. Humans had learned that once people thought they understood you, it was best to let them enjoy the illusion. The bids crept upward in small, cautious increments. No one wanted to overpay for a species widely regarded as high maintenance. Humans required food cooked a certain way, environments tuned to uncomfortable temperatures, and social interaction that bordered on emotional labor. Several past acquisitions had ended with their owners deeply confused and vaguely insulted. Then the temperature in the hall changed. Not physically. Socially. A ripple of attention spread outward as attendants straightened, security fields subtly recalibrated, and conversations dropped into whispers. The human didn't need a translation collar to recognize that particular silence. He'd heard it in boardrooms, courtrooms, and once, memorably, in a bar right before a chair got thrown. Someone important had arrived. She didn't announce herself. She didn't need to. The Vulpine queen moved through the crowd with effortless authority, her presence sharp and polished, like a blade that had learned how to smile. Her fur was immaculately groomed, deep russet and silver catching the lights as she walked. Multiple tails swayed behind her in a slow, deliberate rhythm that suggested control rather than comfort. Every eye tracked her, including the humans. He tilted his head slightly, studying her the way one might assess an unfamiliar tool. Useful. Expensive. Probably came with instructions no one read. She stopped in front of his display. Up close, her gaze was precise. Evaluative. Not hungry. Not dismissive. Curious in a way that made the human feel less like an object and more like a puzzle someone intended to solve properly. Well, she said, voice smooth and perfectly translated. You're not what I expected. The human smiled. That makes two of us. The caller hesitated, then translated. Subject expresses agreement and deference. The queen's ears flicked. Just once. If she noticed the mistranslation, she didn't comment. Around them, the crowd leaned in. Whispers sparked like static. She's interested. That's unusual. Isn't she above this sort of thing? The queen didn't rush. She circled the containment field slowly, eyes never leaving the human. He resisted the urge to turn with her, choosing instead to remain still, letting her set the pace. It was a small thing, but it mattered. Humans understood power dynamics instinctively, even when pretending not to. You seem comfortable, she observed. I've been in worse rooms, he replied. With worse lighting. The caller translated. Subject displays resignation. That made her smile. Just a little. The current highest bid hovered at a respectable but unimpressive number. The queen glanced at it, then back at the human. That's all? One of the auction officials cleared their throat nervously. Humans are an acquired taste, Your Majesty. Everything worthwhile is, she said lightly. Then she placed her bid. The number that appeared was not respectable. It was not cautious. It was not polite. It was the kind of number that made people forget how to breathe for a moment. Conversation stopped mid-syllable. Several collectors recalculated their budgets and their life choices simultaneously. The human blinked. Once. Huh, he said. Guess I should have dressed up. The caller translated. Subject expresses surprise and gratitude. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Gasps. Outraged murmurs. A scandalized hiss from someone who had absolutely been planning to bid next. Everyone assumed the same thing at once, because of course they did. A bid like that could only mean one thing. Interest. Personal interest. The kind that came with closed doors and very specific expectations. The human felt the shift in the room, the sudden weight of implication pressing in from all sides. He sighed again. This is usually where someone buys me a drink first, he muttered. The caller translated. Subject references bonding ritual. That did not help. The queen raised an eyebrow. Amused now. Definitely amused. You assume much, she said. I'm adaptable, he replied. It's a survival trait. The caller translated. Subject claims flexibility. A few members of the crowd choked on their refreshments. The auction official stammered. Your Majesty, if there are specific intentions. There are, the queen said smoothly. Very specific. That was all it took. The rumor mill ignited. People leaned toward one another, whispering theories that said far more about their own imaginations than about either of the individuals at the center of the attention. The human felt none of the fear they expected. Mostly, he felt curious. Anyone willing to spend that much without blinking either knew something everyone else didn't, or was about to learn it the hard way. He met her gaze again. So, he said, do I get a say in this, or is this one of those surprise arrangements? The caller translated. Subject seeks reassurance. The Queen chuckled softly. You'll have more say than you think. The bid timer ticked down. No one else dared challenge it. Not out of respect, but out of self-preservation. When the timer expired, a chime echoed through the hall, final and absolute. Sold, the official announced weakly. The word landed with a strange weight. The human rolled his shoulders again, already adjusting, already adapting. If there was one thing humans were good at, it was figuring things out after the fact. The Queen leaned closer to the containment field. Pack lightly, she said. You won't need much. Story of my life, the human replied. The caller translated. Subject expresses acceptance. The crowd watched, stunned and scandalized, convinced they had just witnessed the most indulgent acquisition in recent history. None of them had any idea how wrong they were. The transport was quieter than the auction hall, which the human appreciated immediately. No crowds. No commentary. Just a low, steady hum of advanced engines and the faint scent of something expensive and faintly citrus. He sat where he'd been directed, hands resting loosely on his knees, posture relaxed in a way that looked casual but stayed alert. Humans learned early how to look unbothered while quietly cataloging exits, tools, and people. The Vulpine Queen stood across from him, reviewing a holographic display filled with scrolling data. None of it seemed to involve him directly, which was either reassuring or deeply concerning. She dismissed the display with a flick of her claw and finally turned her full attention toward him. You're wondering why, she said. Among other things, he replied. But I'm pacing myself. The caller translated. Subject expresses cautious curiosity. She smiled again. That same small, knowing smile. Good. Impatience ruins most arrangements. Arrangements. That word carried weight. It suggested planning, structure, expectations. The human nodded once, signaling he was listening, even as his mind tested the term from every angle. She gestured toward a nearby console. Sit closer. This will make more sense if you can see. He hesitated just long enough to make it polite, then moved. The seat adjusted automatically to his weight, sagging slightly as if surprised. He patted the armrest. Comfortable, he said. Very accommodating. The caller translated. Subject expresses approval. That earned him a brief glance. You're going to enjoy this, she said. I've been told that before. The caller, perhaps tired of nuance, translated. Subject expresses optimism. The display lit up again, this time showing a schematic of a sleek but heavily modified starship. Systems were highlighted in overlapping colors. Warning icons blinked like nervous thoughts. This, the Queen said, is my personal vessel. The human leaned forward, interest genuine now. Looks fast. It is, she agreed. When it works. There it was. The first crack. He smiled despite himself. She continued unfazed. It's temperamental. The systems are powerful but sensitive. They require constant recalibration. And my previous technical staff. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Found the process emotionally taxing. The human raised an eyebrow. Emotionally. They took things personally, she said. The ship did not respond well to that. He nodded slowly. Anyone who had ever worked with stubborn machinery understood immediately. So, he said, you bought a human. I acquired a solution, she corrected. The caller translated. Subject acknowledges purpose. He snorted before he could stop himself. You know I'm not a certified mechanic, right? I know, she said. You're better. That made him pause. She tapped a control, pulling up a series of logs. Videos played briefly, clips of human technicians from prior encounters. Humans crawling into tight spaces. Humans hitting panels with tools they absolutely shouldn't be using that way. Humans fixing problems through methods that defied both logic and warranty agreements. You improvise, the Queen continued. You adapt. You speak to machines as if they're stubborn colleagues instead of delicate instruments. Sometimes they listen, he said. Sometimes they just like being yelled at. The caller translated. Subject describes bonding behavior. She nodded thoughtfully. Exactly. The realization settled in, slow and strange. He wasn't here because of curiosity, or indulgence, or spectacle. He was here because humans treated problems like conversations instead of equations. And the bidding, he said carefully. That was necessary. Yes, she replied without hesitation. If I had asked, others would have interfered. If I had explained, they would have misunderstood. A high bid discouraged questions. He chuckled. It certainly sent a message. Several, she agreed. Most of them incorrect. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the ship humming around them. The human let his shoulders relax fully now, tension bleeding away as the situation clarified. This wasn't captivity. It was employment with unusually dramatic onboarding. So, he said, roommate then. She blinked. Roommate? You said pack lightly, he reminded her. And I assume if I'm fixing your ship, I'm not commuting. Her tails flicked in what might have been amusement. You assume correctly. Ground rules? He asked. Of course. No touching my coffee, he said. No reprogramming my collar without asking. And if something starts smoking, I get to hit it once before we panic. She considered this. Acceptable. He leaned back, satisfied. In return, I'll keep your ship running, your rivals confused, and your staff from quitting dramatically. An ambitious offer, she said. I'm a people person. The caller translated. Subject expresses confidence. The ship lurched slightly, lights flickering as if on cue. A warning tone chimed, sharp and insistent. The human sighed fondly. Ah. That sound. She's talking already? The Queen watched as he stood, rolling up his sleeves without ceremony. You understand it? I understand frustration, he said. Machines have it too. He approached the console, fingers flying across controls he technically shouldn't have known how to use. The ship responded immediately, alarms softening, lights stabilizing. He leaned in, murmuring under his breath. Encouragement. Mild insults. Promises of maintenance. The caller translated none of it properly. The Queen observed, fascination genuine now. You weren't exaggerating. Humans rarely do, he replied. We just phrase things badly. The system hummed into a steady rhythm. The warning icons vanished. The human stepped back, wiping his hands on his pants. There, he said. She'll behave for a while now. The Queen exhaled slowly. That alone was worth the bid. He grinned. Wait until you see what I can do with your social problems. She laughed, an unguarded sound, surprised and sharp. You intend to help with those as well? I'm already here, he said. Might as well earn my keep. The caller translated. Subject expresses loyalty. She studied him for a long moment, reassessing everything the galaxy thought it knew about humans. Very well, she said. Welcome aboard. He nodded once, comfortable now in a way he hadn't been on the display platform. Glad to be of service. And for the first time since the auction, no one was laughing at him. News of the Queen's acquisition traveled faster than her ship ever could. By the time they reached the outer trade lanes, rumors had already metastasized into something resembling doctrine. The human was no longer described as a curiosity. He was a precedent. Entire think tanks formed overnight to discuss what it meant when a Vulpine monarch invested that heavily in a single Terran with no visible weapons and an alarming amount of confidence. The human, for his part, was busy trying to locate the ship's coffee system. This, he said, staring at the sleek dispenser that had stubbornly refused his commands for 10 straight minutes, is an act of aggression. The Queen watched from across the chamber, tail flicking lazily. It dispenses a perfectly balanced stimulant blend. It tastes like regret, he replied. And metal. The caller translated. Subject expresses dissatisfaction. The dispenser emitted a defensive chirp. The human tapped it twice, firmly but not unkindly. The machine whirred, recalibrated, and produced something darker, richer, and significantly more human. "There we go," he said, lifting the cup. "Now we can govern." That interaction alone made it into at least 3 classified reports. Within days, representatives from other species began requesting human consultation. Not ownership, everyone was very careful about the phrasing, but access. Short-term exposure. Controlled environments. Pilot programs. The idea that a human might be useful had taken hold, and the galaxy did what it always did when faced with a new trend: it overcorrected wildly. One ambassador requested a human to improve morale. Another wanted one to stress test diplomacy. A third asked, in writing, whether humans could be safely deployed near ancient artifacts. To see what happens. The Queen declined most of them. Scarcity increases value, she explained casually. The human overheard this while rerouting power through a system that had absolutely not been designed to accept rerouting. "You know I can hear you, right?" "Yes," she said. "That's part of the value." He snorted. Figures. Meanwhile, analysts struggled to update their models. Humans were now being listed under revised categories: unstable asset, social catalyst, emotionally disruptive. None of those fit neatly into existing frameworks. Humans weren't conquerors. They weren't strategists in the traditional sense. They didn't dominate through force or intellect alone. They dominated by changing the tone of the room. The human did this constantly, often without realizing it. He fixed things by talking to them. He resolved conflicts by refusing to take insults seriously. He confused hardened warriors by offering them snacks. Once, during a particularly tense negotiation, he diffused a potential incident by admitting he had no idea what was going on and asking someone to explain it slower. The resulting silence was reportedly unsettling. Rival leaders attempted to imitate the Queen's success. A few acquired humans of their own. The results were mixed. Some humans adapted well, thriving in chaos and turning dysfunction into something resembling progress. Others overwhelmed their hosts with questions, sarcasm, and an alarming tendency to rearrange furniture for better flow. One particularly ambitious warlord returned a human after 3 days, citing excessive morale and unacceptable levels of eye contact. The Queen's human, however, settled in comfortably. He learned the ship's quirks. Which panels needed encouragement. Which systems responded best to being ignored. He made the space livable in subtle ways, adjusting lighting, reprogramming ambient sounds, leaving mugs in places that felt intentional. The ship ran smoother. The crew stopped bracing themselves for disaster. Even the Queen noticed the difference. "You've changed the atmosphere," she remarked one cycle. "Yeah," he said. "I opened a window." Metaphorically. The caller translated. Subject expresses environmental optimization. She smiled. "I chose well." The galaxy noticed that too. Trade routes stabilized. Negotiations involving the Queen became easier. Not softer, exactly. Just less brittle. Her rivals underestimated the human constantly, mistaking his casual demeanor for lack of influence. By the time they realized their mistake, they were already agreeing to things they hadn't planned to. One council member later summarized it best. "He didn't overpower us. He outnormed us." The human remained largely indifferent to his growing reputation. Fame, he had learned, was just another room full of people making assumptions. He preferred tangible problems. Loose connections. Broken systems. Bad coffee. When asked directly about the auction, he shrugged. "Everyone thought I was being bought for entertainment," he said. "Turns out I was hired for maintenance." The caller translated. Subject expresses humility. The Queen corrected it privately. "You were hired because you're difficult to ignore." He considered that. "Yeah," he said slowly. "That tracks." Reports continued to circulate. Humans were now officially classified as high-impact variables. Acquiring one was no longer a joke. It was a risk. And like all good risks, it came with potential reward. As for the Queen, her standing rose. Not because she owned a human, but because she understood one. She'd seen past the display, the laughter, the assumptions. She'd recognized value where others saw inconvenience. The human finished his coffee and leaned back, surveying the ship as it glided smoothly through space. "You know," he said, "for a scandalous purchase, this worked out pretty well." She inclined her head. "The galaxy mocked you." "They do that," he replied. "It's how we know we're doing something interesting." The caller translated nothing at all that time. Perhaps it had finally learned to stay quiet. Somewhere far behind them, in halls filled with revised placards and outdated assumptions, the story continued to spread. Everyone had laughed at the human on display. Until the Vulpine Queen placed her bid. And the galaxy learned, a little too late, that humans were never meant to be owned. They were meant to be underestimated.